All right, ladies and gentlemen, today is another good day the Lord have made. We thank God for everything. Right, so let's first of all commit what we're gonna do now. Let's into the hands of God. We humbly ask God to give us His wisdom to guide us to be able to achieve what we need to achieve today. All right, like I said, just give me some few seconds or few minutes, so that I can be able to cover the ISAT. This is the ISAT you are going to do. This one is level 3 ISAT. It's very, very important. This one constitutes the practical component of your vocational studies. Don't joke with it. It constitutes 15% of your final mark. So if you don't get up to 50% in the exam, no, not in the exam, in the in the ISAT mark, right? Sorry to say, you are not going to be eligible to write the exam. You must make sure that you pass it. Very, very important. So, what you need to do is this. I'm going to explain to you all the things that are required of you so that you can be able to do it on your own, right? But anyhow, I will still be guiding you through, right? Throughout the whole process. Okay, as we have it here, said this is a practical application task that tests your ability to apply the knowledge, right, and skill acquired in the vocational subject. For example, project management, right, as in this case. Then the work required from you is an important and compulsory component of your study. It's very important. Don't play with it. Students, on the last day of the exam, from my experience here, we see students last day crying because they didn't hand in their ISAT. They were disallowed from writing the exam. There was one guy in was it level 4 or level 3? That guy came. I was always telling him, reminding him, bring your ISAT, bring your ISAT. Say, sir, I'm coming, I'm coming. The last day, the boy didn't hand it. When he came to write the exam here, the boy was disallowed. He was crying because that is the rule. We couldn't bend the rule. And he was a very good boy. And he was passing very well. Only that thing. And that boy now he passed on. He's no longer alive again. You see? So guys, you must be serious. You must make sure that you take these things serious. Your eyesight is a very important component that you don't need to joke with. Then, general information. Study the task carefully. Of course, you need to study the task carefully for you to know what to do in the first place. Then, note the mark and time allocation per subtask. And for the task as a whole, you need to know how to manage your time. It's very important, right? Time management. Then you need to study the resources required carefully. Use the assessment tool as guidance on how you will be assessed. You know the assessment tool, that is the rubric, right? The rubric is there for you to guide you in terms of what is required of you and how you are going to be assessed. You are required to provide proof that, hello, you are required to provide proof that you submitted work done by yourself, right? You must not plagiarize. You know what is meant by plagiarism? Don't go and copy something like last time you went to go and get something from the internet and you copy and paste it on your assignment, and at the end of the day, it was not making sense, right? You must make sure that whatever you're doing must be correct. Right. I'm talking to you generally. You understand? Remember, this is on the air. It's not only you. I'm talking to everyone. Right? Yeah. Unless you are a victim, there you will say he's talking to me. Right? Okay. Description of task. This is how it goes. So you know about risk management, right? Haven't we done risk management? You've done it in operations management. You've done it in operations management. Right. So What is going to happen is this, right? Let me try to reduce the volume here now. Okay, so a risk, as you do know, you know what is a risk? Risk is Ngozi, right? Is that thing still working? Okay. Risk, you know what is risk? Risk in Kosa is Ngozi, danger, right? A risk is not a good news, right? It's not an event that is good, literally. But in project management, we say risk is any uncertain event that may happen during the course of your project. If it does happen, it can have a positive or negative effect, as the case may be. Your project may have a positive or negative effect, depends on the impact, right, of the risk in your project. Right. So we said risk is a key challenge in project success. You know about it. It's a key challenge. For example, if we are talking in terms of financial risk, right? The risk that the probability or the impact of you not having money for you to be able to complete your project, right? Then managers needs to be aware of any potential risk, right? Potential in the sense that it could happen, it may happen, but nobody knows, right? It's based on probabilities, probabilistic. It can happen, it may not happen. Then plan for them. So you need to be able to identify the potential risk, then you assess the risk in terms of the likelihood of the risk happening, then you make a plan, the strategy on how to mitigate against the risk. You know what I'm talking about, right? Then failure to manage risk could derail an otherwise successful project. Derail, right? You know what we mean by derail. It can make the project to go out of track. Right. I like that language. It's like this examiner borrowed that language from me. I always fond of using that concept. It could derail the project, otherwise successful projects, right? Derail a project that could perhaps that was going well, but because of the risks, then something else could happen, right? That could jeopardize the realization of the project objective. So revisit your project from part one and part two and assess the potential risk. You know the project that you've identified at the start of the year for your part one and part two. Then you need to revisit it and assess the potential risk that could make your that project not to be successful. Then we said, okay, to read verbatim from the task and assess the potential risks that could hinder attainment of the set of objective and develop a risk management plan. Right? What do we mean by risk management plan? Hello, you're making noise now. What do we mean by risk management plan? Right? What it means is that when you identify the various risks, you assess the risk, right? In terms of the likelihood, how likely is the identified risk or the identified risk is going to happen, right? When you discover that is going to happen, it's likely that it's going to happen. You know what I mean by likely? The probability is very high, or it could be the probability is low, or it could be medium. Based on that, you develop a strategy. For example, if you have identified a risk that you know is going to happen, and if that risk happen, your project is finished. So you need to make a plan for it seriously, right? You cannot take chances on that. But when you assess the risk, you discover that perhaps it's not going to happen, right? Or the probability is very low, the likelihood is very low. Let me put it that. And when it's happened, it's gonna be a big problem. The strategy that you are going to use to mitigate against that will be different from the one that got high likelihood and high impact. Right? So those are the things we are talking about. So as any project should have preset inspection criteria for handover. Okay, this one is another segment. Right? Here we are talking about the risk. Right. Here now we are talking about uh, inspection criteria. right, for handing over a project. When you finish a project, what do? You hand it over to the beneficiary, right? Before you hand over to the beneficiary, what is going to happen? You must make sure that everything in the project is satisfactorily done, right? Before you hand over, you need to go to the site to do a kind of an inspection, right? For you not to forget things, it's always advisable that you have a set of pre criteria. We call it preset inspection criteria. So that when you go to the site, you look at, okay, for example, let's say you are coming to inspect this classroom, if it is properly done. Okay, you say, okay, the fluorescent, you will write all those preset criteria, right? What we call preset inspection criteria. Okay, now you look at your book, the criteria, fluorescent lamps, this must be 9, right? Then you check 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. One is missing, right? You're gonna write down, say one is missing. If it is complete, you say complete. Then you look at the wall. Is the wall plastered properly? If there are some errors, then you put a remark, right? Based on your preset criteria, inspection criteria, right? So that you can be able, why do you do that? So that you can be able to remember, not to forget things, right? Okay. Now, you don't want a situation whereby you hand over the project to the beneficiary and there are some defects, errors, snag list, right? There are some snag. You must make sure that there is devoid of any snag. Snag means error, mistakes. All right. So then, by virtue of this, remember what we are dealing on now. Inspection, preset inspection criteria for handing over purpose. So they said you must design a 10 criterion, right? Criterion, that is the plural. Inspection, 10 Design a 10 criterion inspection template for your project, right? The relevance of the choosing criteria will be assessed according to your project, right? It's like that your project now is finished. Remember the project you identified in term 1, your part 1 project. So here now we assume that the project has been completed or has been completed. You design a preset inspection criteria now to inspect that project before you hand over to the beneficiary. Are you getting it? Right. Then the inspection criteria must not be generalized. It must be based on your project, right? Then project managers and team must learn from experience how to improve on the future project. And this can only be possible if proper evaluation of project is conducted. You see, why do we need, they are talking about lessons learned now, right? This thing is done because when you go to a project that is finished, you need to evaluate to see how things were done, whether things were done right or wrong, right? You need to know things that were not done properly, right? Then from there you can learn for future projects. We call it lessons learned that you can apply for future projects. So that is another thing they are talking about here now. So there are a lot of things that they mix together here. This kind of like a basket, full of different items. So at the end of the day, you need to take from this basket for you to be able to answer our questions. Then they said you are therefore required to evaluate your project based on the prescribed outcomes. Okay, let's go. Instruction for the task. We got subtask 1, subtask 2, right? And subtask 3. Okay, let's go quickly. Subtask 1. It's about risk management. We talk about risk, right? So the marks there is 50 marks. Time allocation is 80 minutes, right? Okay, what you need to do is, like I said before, you develop a neat risk management plan in the format prescribed by your lecturer. Of course, we've got a template that you are going to use to tackle that question, right? Each of these questions or the responses you need to provide needs to be in a template, right? Template we provided. We got a worksheet that we are going to use. Then the risk management plan continues from the research done in part 1 and part 2, must be based on part 1 and part 2, and must contain the following element. Risk, right? Description of any 5 risk element to the project. Identify 5 risks, right, that you think could derail your project, right? Then the risk exposure. You say description of each risk in terms of, okay, what do we mean by risk exposure, right? We are talking now in terms of the impact and the likelihood, right? Okay, you need to establish the impact, or rather, first of all, the likelihood of that risk happening, right? Then, and the impact means how it's going to affect your project if it does happen, right? Then the risk prioritization, you prioritize this risk in terms of which one you think are most likely to happen. Then an indication of the rank of each risk as high, right? The one you know that are most likely to happen, moderate or low. Then the risk ownership. Then a risk owner should be, yeah, you see, in a project management, when you've formulated a risk management plan, you must assign somebody to manage the risk, right? For proper execution case. All right. Then, as we said, there must be a risk owner which should be allocated to each risk. Then you must put the title of the person as well as the role, right? Then you need to, because risk management plan cannot be complete if you only identify the risk and you've done the assessment without you developing the mitigation plan, mitigation strategy in terms of how you need to reduce the impact of the risk. Right. So, because that is the most important thing. You cannot identify something and at the end of the day, you see that it's going to affect your project. You don't have a strategy, right? There must be a strategy. So, that is what we mean by mitigation plan, right? So, risk mitigation is a way of mitigating each identified risk, right? Of course, you need to come up with contingency plan. You know what is contingency plan? Plan B. Right. Yeah. You need to have a contingency plan in place as well. Then they said this should be typed under the supervision of your lecturers. You must make sure you type it. Although I'm not going to be, yeah, you can go, but I'm going to be explaining it. Don't worry. I'm going to continue. I will continue with it. Don't worry. Yeah. So there must be a mitigation plan, right? You need to type it out, although I'm not going to be in the computer room for you, but obviously there will be a way for me to, I will devise a means of supervising you to make sure that you type it out neatly. Right? Yeah. Okay. So now that one is for subtask 1. Now subtask 2. Then project handing over. This is where we talk about the preset inspection criteria. So you need to design what we call preset inspection criteria. So it must be 10. So here, before you hand over, like I said, there must be a kind of inspection whereby you need to establish that all the job have been satisfactorily completed. All the tasks in the project have been satisfactorily completed. Make sure it's based on your task 1 and task 2 projects. So all what you need to do is to design a suitable checklist with 10 criteria to be used by the project manager to verify that all aspects of the project have been completed before you hand over. Right. Then that preset inspection criteria is called checklist. That is another language for it. Checklist. You know a checklist. You just prepare and you say, this is what I'm going to do. Now, when you get there, you look at your criteria. So, okay, is this one there? Yes. This one, is it there? No. Then you make a remark. It will help you not to remember, not to forget anything. Right. So that is what we are talking about. So, like as we said, the checklist item must be numbered and relevant to the choice of your project. It mustn't be of generic form. It must be relevant to your part one and part two. Then there's a note here. This should be typed under the supervision of your lecturer as the case may be. Then, however, if it is not possible to access a computer, it can also be handwritten on the worksheet because worksheets are provided. So if you're unable to type it, then you need to can make use of a worksheet, but make sure that your writing must be legible enough for someone to be able to read your handwriting. Then that one is for subtask 2, which is about project handing over. The marks allocated to that is 20 marks, and in terms of the time allocation is 40 minutes. Now, let's talk to this other one, the third task, which is the subtask 3, is about project evaluation, right? Project evaluation, it goes like this. At the end of the project, you need to go there and evaluate, to review what have been done in the project. So by virtue of doing that, you can be able to see what have been done right and what haven't been done right. And where you discover that there are certain things that were done correctly, then you can uh, use that method for future purpose or for future project. So by virtue of that, you are now required, as far as your task is concerned, to do a kind of project evaluation based on your task one and the task two, which is part one, part two, if you will. Then you are required to write an evaluation report that can serve as a lesson for future projects. Essentially, that is the main reason why you need to do, or one of the most important reasons why you need to do project evaluation, for you to be able to establish what you did right and how you can be able to improve on what were not done properly. So the project must be evaluated against the objectives, right? Because when you are evaluating a project, you evaluate the project compared to, you look at the objectives, right? It goes like this. Before you start a project, there are certain things you want to achieve by doing the project. Those are the objectives. So at the end of the day, when you finish with the project now, during your evaluation process, you need to look back and see whether the objectives that you set out to achieve have been achieved by doing the project, or the project is able to achieve the predetermined objectives, right? You look at the time that was set out in form of the time frame. You look at the time it has taken you to execute the project. For example, the project you said you're going to take 6 months, then at the end of the project, you need to reflect by whether the project was done exactly that 6 months or you extended beyond. Then the quality of the project, which here refers to as the standard, then you need to look at the quality as well. The resources that were used in terms of the financial resources, material resources, and human resources. You need to zoom in, you need to evaluate the usage of these resources to see how effective or efficient resources were used, or how efficiently resources were used. Then problem encountered should not be the same as the risk explained in subtask 1. Right. So what we are trying to say here is, perhaps during the course of the project, there could be some other problems that were encountered which were different from the risk identified. So those things must be reported during the project evaluation stage. So there is a note here which says this should be typed. Okay, it's still the presentation, right? So if it's not possible for you to type the work, then perhaps due to not having access to computer, then you can use the worksheet, right? That you are going to be given. Then the following headings should be used for the report. This is how you need to structure the report. What went wrong, right? In terms of what went wrong in the project, right? Which pertains to things that were not done the way it should be, then you need to describe any four shortcomings during the implementation of the project. Shortcomings here, we are talking about the drawbacks, right? So you should be able to identify four that occurred during the execution of the project. Then you need to talk about the improvement of shortcomings, the four shortcomings you've identified here. Then you need to formulate ways of improving on the shortcomings. So you need to describe four ways on how to overcome the shortcomings mentioned above. Then, what went right, the same, what you've done correctly, appropriately, then you need to describe it in terms of achievement, what you've achieved, and if the objectives and requirements of the project were met. Then you need to talk about the lessons learned, right? In terms of documenting two lessons learned during the project. So essentially, this is how your ISAT is formulated. So now, in terms of time and marks allocation, you have a matrix here, a matrix table that states the time and the mark allocation. Let me look for my stuff here. Yeah, let me look for my laser. So here you have time and mark allocation. Subtask 1, this is the activity, is about risk management plan. Then the time allocation is 80 minutes. Then, uh, yeah, this is the time allocation, this is the mark allocation, 50 marks for subtask 1. Then there's a checklist, right? That the assessment to checklist is attached, whereby you need to know what needs to be done. Then you have the subtask 2, which is the project handover. It's about uh, things relating to project handover or the handing over of project, if you will. Then the time allocation is 40 minutes. Then the marks is 20, right? Look at the first one, right? Risk management plan. It takes the lion's share here, 50 marks, right? Then the project evaluation is 30 marks, altogether 100 marks. Then the total time allocation is 180 minutes, right? So this is what we call the assessment tool, the checklist, which is the rubric, right? This one detail out how you are going to be assessed, right? Here, task description, this one is risk management plan, project handover, and project evaluation, right? 50 marks for the risk management plan. Here, you need to identify and describe 5 risks relevant to the choosing project. Which choosing project? Your part 1 and the part 2 project, right? So the mark allocation there is 10 marks. Then 1.2, risk exposure. So what you need to do here regarding the risk exposure? You need to briefly describe the impact of each risk and state the probability. The probability means the likelihood of each of the risk occurring. So that one is another 10 marks. Then 1.3, you have the risk prioritization, whereby you need to rank each risk according to the given scale. It could be low, medium, and high. Then 1.4, risk ownership. Of course, somebody needs to be allocated to the risk, to manage the risk. So here you need to state the title, right? And the responsibility of the person that have been assigned to manage the risk as a risk owner. Then 1.5, here we're talking about risk mitigation. You need to describe the ways to reduce the chances of the risk of the, when we say the risk, now they identify risk from occurring. Then contingency plan, you need to describe a kind of a recovery plan for each of the identified risk or mentioned risk. as the case may be, or if you will. Then that one is the first part, subtask 1, the total marks is 50 marks. Then the other one, which is subtask 2, is about project handover or handing over of a project. Then what you need to do is you need to draw up a project handover checklist, as I've already explained, and it should be 10 checkpoints. So then the third one, the subtask 3, is about project evaluation. So you need to name and describe 4 inadequacies during the implementation of the project. Here, inadequacy, in other words, here we refer to as shortcomings or backdrop, as you may like to describe it, if you will. Then 3.2, you need to explain 4 ways to overcome the identified shortcomings, right? Then along with that, you need to talk about the achievements of the project, what have been achieved correctly or appropriately, if you will. Then 5, the marks allocated there is 10 marks. Then you need to document 2 lessons learned during the project, 4 marks. So altogether, you are working towards 100 marks, as you could see there. So that is how it is. Here you have the cover page where you need to write your credentials, if you will, college, WCC, campus, Atlantis campus. Then you have to write your name and first name here. Then your ID number. Then the lecturer's surname and initials. Then date of conclusion of assignment. So yeah, this is how it is, the assessment, right? So that is essentially what you need to do as far as your ISAT is concerned. Right. So now I'm going to present the worksheet. So if you are unable to type, then you're allowed to make use of the worksheet. So let me see where I saved the worksheet. Let me see. Okay, this should be the worksheet. So it's a kind of a template whereby you need to just fill in the answers. Okay, this is the worksheet for the ISET. Right, this is the worksheet. I just hope that this thing doesn't disturb because my PDF file is becoming a problem now. Okay, this is how the worksheet looks like, right? So, yeah, so worksheet will be provided. So in case you're unable to type, if you don't have access to computer for you to type, then you can make use of the worksheet, right? So, ladies and gentlemen, that's it. This is how it is. Like I said, it's a very important component of your vocational studies. You must make sure that you dedicate your time to it and do it properly. Thank you.